They only let him touch the ball as a joke. Until the radar gun lit up. The laughter came first, loud and careless, echoing across the empty baseball field like it belonged there. Marcus stood near the edge of the diamond, holding a worn glove that didn't match the polished uniforms around him. He wasn't dressed like them, didn't move like them, didn't even stand in the same space as them. To them, he was just the janitor. Someone who cleaned the dugout after they left, someone who picked up the trash, someone who stayed invisible until he was needed for something small. "Hey, you ever played?" one of the players called out, spinning a bat lazily in his hands. A few others laughed. Marcus looked up slowly, not offended, not surprised, just aware of the tone behind the question. "A little," he said. "Come on then," another voice added. "Let's see it." It wasn't an invitation. It was entertainment. Marcus stepped forward anyway, his movements calm, steady, like he had done this before in a place that didn't sound like this. He walked onto the field, the dirt crunching softly under his shoes, the evening sun casting long shadows behind him. One of the players tossed him a ball, not carefully, not respectfully, just enough to reach him. "Show us something," he said. Marcus caught it clean. That alone shifted something small, not enough to stop the laughter, but enough to change its tone. He walked toward the mound slowly, the ball resting in his hand, his grip adjusting slightly as if his fingers remembered something his surroundings didn't expect. "Don't take too long," someone joked. Marcus didn't respond. He stepped onto the mound, looked toward the plate, and for a brief moment, everything else faded. The noise, the comments, the expectations, all of it moved to the background. Because this part he knew. He took a breath, then he threw. The ball cut through the air with a sharp, clean sound, faster than anyone expected, faster than the casual setup suggested. It snapped into the catcher's glove with a force that made the player flinch slightly. Silence, not complete, but sudden. "What was that?" someone said. The catcher pulled off his glove slowly, staring at it like it had just surprised him. "Throw it again," another voice said, this time without laughter. Marcus picked up the ball and stepped back onto the mound. This time, the radar gun was turned on. A player held it casually at first, still not fully serious, still expecting something normal. Marcus threw again. The ball moved even faster. The number flashed on the screen. 96. The player holding the radar gun froze for a second, then looked down again, like the number might change if he checked it twice. "Nah," he said quietly. "Check it again," someone else added. Marcus didn't say anything, he just stood there because now they were paying attention. The next throw came sharper, cleaner. 98. The laughter was gone, completely. The field felt different now, the air heavier, the space between them filled with something they hadn't expected to find. "Where did you play?" the catcher asked. Marcus stepped off the mound slowly. "Here and there," he replied. "That's not here and there," another player said, his tone shifting. "That's real." Marcus shrugged slightly, because he wasn't trying to prove anything. He had just been asked to throw, and he did. The coach, who had been standing near the dugout, stepped forward now, his expression focused, his attention fully on Marcus for the first time. "Do that again," he said. Marcus nodded once and stepped back up. This time, everyone watched. No jokes, no comments, just silence. The throw came fast, precise, controlled. The number hit 99. The coach didn't speak right away. He just looked at Marcus for a second longer than before. "Where have you been?" he asked. Marcus met his gaze calmly. "Working," he said. That answer sat in the air, heavy, because it meant something more than it sounded like. Practice ended differently than it started. The same players who had laughed earlier now stood closer, watching, asking questions, trying to understand what they had missed. Marcus didn't change. His posture stayed the same. His tone stayed calm, because nothing about him had shifted. Only their perception had. A few days later, the team was short on pitchers for a game. Injuries had stacked up, options were limited, and the coach had a decision to make. It wasn't an easy one, but it was clear, Reed. He said, "You're coming with us." The locker room was quieter this time. Not silent, but different. Marcus got ready without saying much, his movements steady, focused, like he had always been part of this space. The game started under bright lights, the stadium filled, the energy sharp and alive. Marcus sat on the bench at first, watching, reading the flow, understanding the rhythm. Then the moment came. The starting pitcher struggled early. Walks, missed, throws, pressure building. The coach looked down the bench. Then at Marcus. "You're up." Marcus stood, picked up his glove, and walked toward the mound. The noise of the crowd rising slightly, curiosity mixing with uncertainty. He stepped onto the field, same mound, different stage. He took a breath, then he threw. The first pitch hit the glove with that same sharp sound. Strike. The second came faster, cleaner strike. The third ended the inning. The crowd reacted, not fully, but enough. Inning after inning, Marcus stayed consistent. His control held, his speed didn't drop, his focus stayed locked in. The opposing team started adjusting, trying to read him, trying to catch up. They couldn't. By the final inning, the game was tight. Score close. Tension high. Marcus stood on the mound, the ball in his hand, the stadium louder now. Every movement watched, every decision carrying weight. 2 outs, last batter, he wound up and threw. The ball cut through the air like it had all night. The swing came late, missed, strike 3. The game ended. The crowd stood, louder now, real. Marcus didn't celebrate wildly. He just stood there for a second, taking in the moment, the same calm expression, the same steady presence. Because this wasn't new to him. Only to them. Back in the dugout, the energy was completely different. Teammates approached him, voices louder, respect clearer, questions turning into acknowledgement. The coach stepped forward. "You've been here this whole time," he said. Marcus nodded slightly. "Yeah," he replied. The coach looked at him, then shook his head once. Because he understood now, this wasn't about finding talent. It was about noticing it. And they hadn't. Not until it forced itself into the moment. Marcus sat down on the bench, placing his glove beside him, his breathing steady, his thoughts clear. Because in the end, it wasn't about the radar gun. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about how long it took for them to see what had been there all along, and how quickly everything changed. Once they finally did. The noise from the stadium didn't disappear all at once. It followed Marcus as he walked back toward the dugout, echoing behind him, fading slowly like a wave pulling away from the shore. His teammates were louder now, calling his name, clapping him on the back, some of them smiling in a way they hadn't before, like they had just discovered something that had been standing next to them the entire time. Marcus stepped down into the dugout and sat at the far end of the bench, placing his glove beside him with the same calm movement he had used all night. His breathing stayed even, his posture relaxed, but his eyes moved quietly across the field, taking everything in without getting caught in it. Across from him, 2 players were still talking about the last pitch, replaying it in their minds, their voices filled with a kind of disbelief that hadn't been there earlier. 99 again, one of them said. And that control, the other replied. That's not normal. Marcus didn't join the conversation. He didn't need to. The game had already said everything. A few minutes later, the coach walked into the dugout, his expression more thoughtful now, less distant than before. He looked at Marcus for a moment, then sat down a few seats away. "You handled that well?" he said. Marcus nodded once. "I just threw," he replied. The coach let out a small breath, almost like he was trying to process something bigger than just the game. "We should have seen it earlier," he said quietly. Marcus didn't respond right away. He looked out at the field, where groundskeepers had already started moving, preparing everything for the next day, restoring the space back to neutral like nothing had just happened. "Maybe," Marcus said after a moment. The coach glanced at him, then looked away again. Because that answer didn't push back, but it didn't agree either. It just sat in the middle, true in its own way. The locker room after the game carried a different kind of energy than before. The laughter was still there, but it had changed. Less sharp, less careless, more controlled. Conversations circled around the game, around Marcus, around what he had just done. Marcus moved through it quietly, placing his glove in his locker, sitting down, beginning the routine of winding down after a game like he had done many times before in places that didn't feel like this. One of the players who had laughed earlier stepped closer now, hesitating for a second before speaking. "Hey," he said, "that was good." Marcus looked up at him, his expression neutral but open. "Thanks," he replied. The player nodded, shifting his weight slightly, like he wasn't fully sure what to do with the moment. "Didn't know you had that," he added. Marcus held his gaze for a second. "It was always there," he said. The player didn't answer, because there wasn't much to say to that. A little later, Marcus stepped out of the locker room and into the hallway. The noise behind him faded again, replaced by the quieter rhythm of the stadium settling down. The bright lights of the field no longer reached this space, leaving everything softer, more grounded. He walked slowly, not in a hurry, his mind not racing, just steady. A reporter stood near the exit, holding a microphone, her attention immediately shifting when she saw him. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" she said. He stopped, nodding once. "You went from working around the team to pitching one of the strongest games of the season," she said. "How does that feel?" Marcus thought for a moment, not searching for an answer, just choosing the right way to say what he already understood. "It feels like I got a chance," he said. The reporter tilted her head slightly. "And before that, Marcus looked at her, his expression calm. I was still the same player, he replied. That answer lingered, because it pointed to something deeper than the moment. The reporter lowered the microphone slightly, then nodded. Thank you, she said. Marcus gave a small nod back and continued walking. Outside, the night air felt cooler, quieter, the kind of stillness that lets everything settle without forcing it. The stadium lights glowed behind him, bright against the dark sky. But the energy from inside no longer carried the same intensity. He reached his car and paused for a second before opening the door, looking back once at the field in the distance. From here, it looked calm, normal, like just another game had ended. Marcus got into the car and sat there for a moment, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, his breathing steady. He didn't turn on the radio, he didn't check his phone, he just sat in the quiet, because what stayed with him wasn't the noise, or the reactions, or even the win. It was the path to it, the way he had been seen before the first pitch, the way he had been placed in a role that didn't match what he could do. The way it took a moment under pressure for everything to finally shift. Marcus started the engine and pulled out slowly, the road ahead empty for a few seconds before merging into the flow of the city. Streetlights passed overhead in steady intervals, their glow moving across the windshield in a calm, predictable rhythm. Everything outside continued as usual. But inside, something had settled into place. He understood now, more clearly than before, that recognition doesn't always come when it should. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it delays. Sometimes it only arrives when there's no way left to ignore it. And when it finally does, it changes how people look at you. But it doesn't change who you were before that moment. Marcus drove through the quiet streets, his focus steady, his posture relaxed. He wasn't thinking about the next game. He wasn't thinking about what people would say tomorrow. He was thinking about something simpler. How easy it is for people to miss what doesn't fit their expectations. How long something real can stand right in front of them without being seen. And how one undeniable moment can force everything into focus. The car moved forward, the city lights stretching out ahead, constant and unchanged. Marcus kept driving, the night calm around him, the understanding clear and steady. Because once you've lived through a moment where everything shifts, not because you changed, but because people finally noticed, you don't carry frustration, you carry clarity. And that clarity stays with you long after the moment is over.